Welcome in, everybody. Happy Wednesday. It is Biscuits and SEC Live. I'm Hammer. That is Bossman, a.k.a. Hank and Alex. This is our Jordan show, 23rd show. So appreciate you all joining us and sticking with us each week through the off season as we continue to talk all things SEC. Before we hop into the show tonight, just want to remind everybody to give us a follow on social media at Biscuits and SEC, subscribe to the YouTube page, and sign up for our newsletter. You can see down there, biscuitsandsec.com/newsletter, or you just go to the website. There'll be a pop-up that's going to ask you to subscribe. We are delivering that Wednesday mornings during the off season. During football season, we typically go 2 times a week. But for now, we've got the 1 time a week cadence. And as a reminder, we're live here every Wednesday night at 7 o'clock Eastern. So again, thanks for joining us. Appreciate y'all. And without further ado, we can hop into it. Bossman, how you doing tonight?
We are doing good. It is extremely fitting that it is our 23rd show, our Jordan show, and we're going to be talking basketball, talking some March Madness. So really looking forward to it. Pretty awesome that we have so many SEC teams in the field, which gives us a lot to talk about here on our show. And also for everyone who was hoping that we were going to do our impact transfers on defense. For the SEC, we did our impact transfers on offense last week of those coming into the conference. We're going to push that at least a week because we'll also have basketball to talk about next week too. But we will get to the impact transfers coming in on defense as well. But for tonight, got a beautiful day outside. It's spring. Weather's changing. We got baseball on, and we got plenty of March Madness to get excited for. So looking forward to talking about it tonight.
Yeah, absolutely. So we did punt that impact transfer, as Bossman just said, to next week, or we'll see. But we wanted to talk about the tournament because it's the biggest thing going on right now. It's one of the best events in sports, and the SEC has 14 teams in, which is a record, I believe, for a conference. We'll see how long that stands with all these conferences growing. It's seemingly every couple of years, but 14 out of 16 teams making it is pretty unbelievable. I guess you could put an asterisk on that and say maybe it's more like 13 with Texas only being in the play-in game tonight. But either way, 14 of the 16 teams are playing postseason basketball, and they at least are in or have a chance to make the tournament. Nobody's in the NIT or I think there's like a crown or I don't know. There's a bunch of random tournaments these days outside of the March Madness and the NIT, but we're not going to talk about that tonight. So of the 14 teams, we'll just hop right into it. So we've got the round 1 matchups here. I'm not going to read through all these because there's a ton of them. And obviously, if you want to know game times, just look at your bracket that I'm sure every one of y'all has filled out. But some really interesting matchups here in round 1. We'll see, who can get through the opening game and then perhaps even the opening weekend. So maybe when we come back, next week, hopefully we'll be talking about quite a bit of teams making it to the Sweet 16. But any matchups right off the bat as we kick this off that you're interested in or that are piquing your, just something you want to make sure you get eyes on tomorrow and Friday?
Yeah, there's one in particular. I'm really interested in Arkansas and Kansas, really because Arkansas, got fairly hot at the end of the year, solidified their spot in the tournament late in the year. Kind of through mid-year, they were seen as a bubble team and kind of going the wrong direction, and Cal righted the ship. And then you have a Kansas team who got better as the year went on, but it's not the typical Kansas team. that we're used to seeing. We're used to seeing Kansas as a 1 seed, a 2 seed. I mean, they're a top 5 blue blood in the sport all time. So to have them as a 7 seed, and you get an Arkansas team that's a 10 seed and has gotten hot near the end of the year with a Hall of Fame caliber coach like Coach Cal. I'm really interested to watch that game. I think it's going to be a really, really good game, and I think Arkansas has got a real shot to pull it off. And we'll get to them later, but I think that they've got a real shot to make a little run.
Yeah, absolutely. I think for me, a couple of the games that stand out, and maybe we can just sort of parlay this into some upset alert talk. But I'm fascinated with. First of all, our alma mater, A&M, going up against Yale, Ivy League champs. I'm terrified of that game. I won't lie. It seems like, the perfect kind of game for A&M to lose. And what really has been, in terms of a regular season, one of the best that A&M has had in a long time. They've been competitive with Buzz since he got there. But, finishing 5th in this gauntlet of a conference, getting a 4 seed. I think that's the highest seed we've had since Buzz took over. Somebody, correct me if I'm wrong, but
that's right.
So a really good season, and you run into a team that I'm not going to pretend like I've watched a lot of Yale basketball, but obviously very good record. They won the Ivy League, and the style of basketball that A&M plays is very ripe for an upset if the team that they're playing is hot, because they rely on defense and rebounding. They don't score the ball that well. And so if Yale is out there making shots, then, we could be in trouble. So fascinated with that game. And then the other one, or 2 other ones that I'm, interested in and talking potential upset would be Ole Miss, North Carolina. Obviously, Ole Miss, I think if they can get through North Carolina, they has a good chance with Beard. They've got a great team and could make a pretty good run. But, I mean, it's North Carolina. They've got talent. They had a somewhat of a down year in the ACC this year, but they handled their business in the play-in game. So that one could be a potential upset looming. And then Missouri and Drake is another one, just in terms of an upset that I'm a little worried about. You'll come to find out, viewers, as you watch this, that neither of us are college basketball experts, but from what I've heard about Drake and why this potentially would be a tough matchup is they play very slow, so they could make this kind of sloppy, just kind of a low scoring knockdown drag out game. And I think they also lead the country in turnover margin, so they take care of the ball and they're good at forcing turnovers. So again, if you're looking for a recipe for an upset, that seems like a good recipe if Drake wins the turnover battle and it's a slow, kind of sloggy, let's say, 50 to 48 type of a game. So those are the 3 that I'm interested in and that I'm a little, concerned with upsets. What about you?
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head. I had written down 2 of those games in particular. And in fact, in my bracket, I just went back and looked. I picked Drake over Mizzou. So those were the 3 games that I was really, watching in terms of upset alert in round 1. Ole Miss, for obvious reasons, right? If you saw the play-in game with UNC, while UNC, I wouldn't have had that game on my upset list, I don't think, had I just seen what UNC did, winning by nearly 40. If it wasn't 40, I didn't see the final score. But when I stopped watching it, UNC was up by, I think, 37 late in the game. So, just for the fact that UNC's a blue blood, they had a little bit of a down year, like you said. However, they're really hot right now, and I was extremely surprised, as I think most of the country was, to watch them win by nearly 40 against San Diego State. So just for the sheer fact that they seem, like they've got the hot hand. Basketball's a streaky game. If you get hot, as we all know, every year in March Madness, there's cinderellas who make deep runs like the George Masons or the VCUs of the world who have made runs all the way to the Final Four. They got hot at the right time. Like George Mason, when that happened years ago, they barely made the tournament. And then all of a sudden they had three guys, that ended up being household names by the end of the tournament. So basketball is a very streaky game. UNC has a hot hand right now. And so you got to be a little bit worried if you're Ole Miss fans, I think, right now, thinking, okay, hey, we thought we were going to get a UNC team that was going to be down, or even, a San Diego State team who is okay. And now we're looking at like, oh, wow, maybe these guys have woken up and, might make a run. So Ole Miss was on my list. A&M and Yale as well was on my list. I think A&M probably wins in round one. I think they've got, enough of their stuff together, the rebounding, which is such a big factor for A&M. You got to watch too. One thing I'll say about A&M is that they do have one of their best players in program history in Wade Taylor. And Aggies fans, if you've watched any A&M basketball this year, which, we've watched a decent amount, is that Wade can be a little bit of a ball hog sometimes. He could try to put everything on his shoulders, do it all himself, and he needs to not do that in the tournament if A&M has a chance to make a deep run. But the deepest runs that A&M has made in their history as a basketball program is when they have, at least one guy who is just the guy, right? And he makes everybody around him better. And he's the one guy like a Michael Jordan, right? I'm not saying A&M's ever had a Michael Jordan, but a player like that where everybody looks to them when it's on the line, right? Whether it was AC Law, Daniel House a couple of years ago, Alex Caruso, who was part of a couple of those teams. And now this year you've got a Wade Taylor. So A&M is 50-50. They're extremely dangerous to make a deep run because of a Wade Taylor type of player, as well as the rebounding prowess they have. They have a good supporting cast as well. But they're also a team that is very streaky, and they haven't been hot late in the year. They had the one win against number one Auburn, but other than that, they've been pretty off. I want to say they lost like 5 of their last 6 or something like that. So that's what I'm watching. I do think though in the second round that is where A&M could get into a lot of trouble, especially because I think that UC San Diego has a very good chance to beat Michigan. And the reason I say that is because UC San Diego can bomb three-pointers. They have some of the best three-pointing percentage in the country. And they just try to make it rain. They try to play Golden State Warriors on you. And if they get hot, they can beat Michigan, and they could be a team that makes a run, and they could beat A&M in the second round if A&M's able to get out of the first round against Yale.
Yeah, no, I think just real quick, 2 more, to touch on those games once more. UNC, I think there's something psychological about a team in their position who most people did not expect them to make the tournament. And there was a lot of kind of backlash about them getting in, especially with their athletic director, Bubba Cunningham, being the chair of the selection committee this year. But that aside, from the team, the Tar Heel team perspective, it's like they have second life in a sense, right? Of like, hey, we really were not sure if this was going to happen, but we've got a chance, so let's make the most out of it. So I think they could be dangerous. And then, on the A&M Yale thing, it's you brought up Wade Taylor. He's the all-time leading scorer at A&M. He's been there forever. And that's the other thing too, a lot of times in March, especially in the one and done era, teams that are old, mature, seasoned can make deep runs. And A&M is very old, mature, and seasoned. I think whenever their senior day was early in March, I believe they had 8 guys that walked. So, you go up and down their roster, it's just a bunch of old dudes, some of which, have transferred in recently, but a lot of which who have just been there forever, along with Wade Taylor, and they're not stars like, Anderson Garcia is not going to light up the scoreboard, but he led the SEC in rebounds last season. I don't know where he stood this season, but, a guy who's been there forever, he's experienced, he's a grinder. So they have a lot of, veteran leadership that, as you said, could lend itself to potentially a dark, kind of a dark horse run. But again, Yale definitely scares me. So I could see that, going either way in round one, especially again, given, although A&M is very, veteran, they're just not explosive on offense. And so they really rely on second chance points And, we've seen them, especially I think back to that Penn State game, I think it was 2 years ago, when that guy just hit like 8 threes on us and we got rolled. So that could easily happen. That's what makes the tournament great. It's one game at a time and survive in advance. So well, that can kind of lead us into the next one. So we can touch here, I think in our next segment on kind of a little bit of everything, but we'll talk like title contenders, some dark horses like an A&M that we just mentioned, potential Cinderella out of the SEC that nobody sees coming. So we'll start with contenders. Who do you actually think from the SEC has a legitimate title chance?
Well, I think this is probably where we could talk about our Final Fours and maybe, release them, because that's who we think is at least, who our contenders are, right? So for me,
yep.
There you go. You can see that I've got Alabama, Tennessee, and Florida. I think those are the 3 teams that have a real shot as title contenders. I think there's others who could make a deep run in the tournament, and hey, Auburn obviously as well is a title contender. I just don't have them in my Final Four, in part because I couldn't pick a whole SEC Final Four, I realized, because there's just no way statistically that is going to happen. Although we have a better statistical chance of that happening than ever before, considering we've got 14 of 16 teams in. But that's probably just not going to happen in all likelihood. So I had to throw in Iowa State instead of Auburn. Sorry, Tigers fans. But at the end of the day, I think Florida's the best team in the country right now. I think they're playing the best basketball. Obviously, just won the SEC tournament. They're a really fun team to watch play, and they, blew the doors off of Alabama in the semifinals, going to the finals. So I just think they're playing the best basketball right now. I think they're the most complete team in America, and those are the 3 teams really that I think have the best chance to win. I just don't trust Auburn enough, frankly, to get it done and to get to the Final Four. But overall, those are the 3 teams that I'm looking at who I think have the best shot at the title this year.
Yeah, I mean, I'll show my Final Four here. 2 of the same teams. So I've got Florida and Tennessee making it, Florida winning it as well. I've got Michigan State coming out of Auburn's side, and then Duke coming out of their regional, which would mean they would take out Alabama. Agree with you that I think Florida's probably the most complete team, seems to be playing the best basketball right now. I do think, though, just in terms of outside of my bracket, like I do think Auburn still has a very legitimate chance to win it all. And I think Auburn and Florida would kind of be my 2, I guess, quote unquote favorites, but I think they probably have the best chance. No surprise there. They're the number 1, 2 of the 4 number 1 seeds. I think Alabama too. I mean, that's just a team, the way that they play with Nate Oates, they score a ton of points. And so if they can stay hot, then they're going to be really tough to beat. Mark Sears is a dog and has been there forever too, right? You talk about a veteran guard who knows how to score and is just going to be a handful for anybody to deal with. He could absolutely lead them on a very deep run. I will say, even though I have Tennessee in the Final Four, I don't. That's one that I would question if they could actually get it all the way there.
They have a tough road.
It's a tough road, and I almost surprised myself by putting them in the Final Four because we're talking about Rick Barnes in March here, and he's got a pretty long track record of not making it that far in March, despite having some really good teams. So although I did pick them to make it to the Final Four, I'd be pretty shocked if they were to actually make it all the way, and win the whole thing. So for me, I like Auburn, Florida, and Alabama as the 3 teams that I think, have a legitimate chance out of the SEC to win it all. What about dark horses? We mentioned a few, with A&M and maybe Ole Miss, but just let's kind of walk through those as well here and see maybe what other teams we think from the SEC could make a deep run, to an Elite Eight or Final Four, perhaps.
Sure. Let me. I'll talk about Ole Miss just a little bit more for a second, and then I'll go into a couple other teams that I think are dark horses. But the reason I've got Ole Miss as a dark horse, even though I also have them on upset watch in the first round, is their turnover margin this year. They get turnovers, right? They play defense. They're in the passing lanes. Chris Beard plays that tough defensive style, and plus 5.5. So plus 5.5 turnovers a game. So if Ole Miss can do that, in the first couple of rounds, they could be a real dark horse. And they got to get hot shooting as well, right? They got to do it on the other end of the floor too. But if they can get transition points, get those turnovers, keep that turnover margin at 5.5, maybe even get a game or two there where they're hitting 6 or 7, 8 turnovers, get a really solid turnover game. I think they've got a real shot to make a deep run. The other two that we haven't talked about too much, a little bit. I talked a little bit about this team, which is Arkansas. The fact that Coach Cal, right, is there at Arkansas now. They seem to be playing hot, even though they lost their leading scorer, mid-year. They're now they're seeming to be, a hotter team, right? They've come together. They believe in each other. Coach Cal's kind of got them on the right track. He was our Muschamp Coach of the Week a couple weeks ago, so that's got to count for something. So I really do, in all seriousness, think that Arkansas could be that, Cinderella, right, if it's out of the SEC. And then finally, for me, I'm also looking at Kentucky, which is kind of crazy to say that Kentucky is a dark horse, right? But they're, what are they, an 8 seed, I think is what they are.
No, Kentucky's a 3.
They're a 3. But even, I don't think most people are talking about them for
I would agree.
a potential a potential deep run, especially because they're coming out of Tennessee's region, which is the Midwest region. And that's just a really difficult region. There's a lot of blue bloods in there. Houston, the number 1 seed. Gonzaga is a blue blood. They're an 8 seed this year, right? Purdue, who's the defending national champs, they're a 4 seed. They're in that
runner-up
last year.
UConn's back-to-back. Purdue lost in the title to them. I thought they had wanted to, but UConn got them last year.
Shows you how much we know. Experts, by the way, right here.
Yeah.
So anyway, it's a tough road because Kentucky's also have Clemson. Clemson's a very good basketball team as the 5 seed in that region. So that region is just very difficult. So anyway, I think that Kentucky as a 3 seed is a dark horse this year to potentially make a deep run. And one of the reasons for that is their transition points. They're 19th in the country in transition points. And if you take away some of these mid-major teams that are also in the top 20 in transition points, take some of those out and just put them in the power 4 conferences, they quickly go into the top 10. So if you're in the top 10 in power 4 conferences in transition points, if you can get those turnovers, if you can speed up the game, then you've got a real shot. And I just think that if Kentucky's able to do that, they've got a real shot to make a deep run. And also because they're Kentucky, they're a very talented team, and Mark Pope has done a very good job, especially with I think his name's Owe, the kid who came from Oklahoma, who's their leading scorer. He's total stud. So if that guy can get hot, Kentucky can really make a deep run.
Yeah, I'll piggyback on what you said about Ole Miss. Again, even though we both had them on upset alert, they're extremely balanced. All 5 starters average double figures. Now, they're all like 10.6 points, so they don't really have one guy who's really filling it up. But I think that's nice that because, if you do only have one guy that can fill it up and he gets cold for a game, teams can struggle. But Ole Miss is very balanced. So I do like, I like where they're at, assuming they can get through round 1. We've sort of already hit on A&M again. I think they're potentially poised for a nice dark horse run. I almost want to say Missouri, but I just don't. I think I actually have Drake beating them too, and even their next round matchup against a Texas Tech or ultimately St. John's. I kind of struggle to see them getting through that. Similar to Vanderbilt, I think St. Mary's is a good team. I think that's a tough matchup, and then they would get Bama in round 2. So I struggle to see Vanderbilt making too deep of a run. I do want to bring up a couple, though, not necessarily like dark horses, because I don't think anybody's going to, predict this to happen, or the percentage of people picking this in their bracket is low. But we have 3 SEC teams that are in the 8-9 games, meaning if they're to get through round 1, they get 1 seeds, which is the ultimate bracket buster, right? If you could take out a 1 seed before the Sweet 16, everybody is, bracket is in the tank. So we've got Oklahoma playing UConn in round 1, which is interesting because I thought the SEC was obviously really good this year. Oklahoma getting a 9 seed kind of surprised me. Obviously, the committee, really, really, really respected what the SEC did. But that's a tough matchup. I haven't watched any UConn basketball this year, but they're back-to-back national champs. And so clearly them being an 8 seed, they're down from that. But still, it's Danny Hurley and a team that knows how to win in March. So that's tough. But if they were to win, they would get Florida in round 2. On the other side, in the Midwest region, Georgia, another tough matchup, plays Gonzaga in round 1. Like you mentioned, a very much a blue blood. I think I was reading recently. I can't remember. I'm going to mess it up, so I won't say it. But Gonzaga has been to the Sweet 16 like for almost a decade running or something crazy. They just, granted, they haven't been getting there as an 8 seed. That, again, for them is quite low in the few era, but another team that knows how to win in March. But again, if Georgia can beat them, then they get up and play Houston in round 2 and have a very good chance to ruin a lot of people's brackets. And then finally in the East, you have Mississippi State matching up with Baylor, also a team that knows how to win in March with a national title in the last handful of years, and Scott Drew. But if they can get through that, they would play Duke. And, Mississippi State's a team, too, when you talk about kind of like runs through one dude, and that's Josh Hubbard. But he can fill it up, and he can take over a game. He's averaging almost 19 points a game. So, again, that's a guy where, hey, if they could get through Baylor, and then it's one game against Duke, who's very beat up at the moment. We're unsure what Cooper Flagg's status is, and I think another guy injured who I don't think is slated to come back. I could be wrong on that, but I think they have another starter who's down. So again, anything can happen in March. I just wanted to call out that there's 3 SEC teams that have a very good chance of ruining a lot of people's brackets, and although maybe not, making a super deep run. Like if you're an 8 seed and you get to the Sweet 16, that's a pretty dang good, Cinderella story, so to speak. I'm trying to think, I guess like in terms of, like a true Cinderella out of the SEC, it's a little hard because most of them are fairly highly seeded. I think your Arkansas pick is pretty good with them being a 10 seed. Coach Cal, been around forever. They're very talented, just, kind of, first year under him, right? It took them a while to get going, but they were playing some really tough basketball at the end. I would just love to see, regardless of how far of a run Arkansas makes, I want to see Arkansas versus St. John's in round 2. John Calipari versus Rick Pitino. I mean, you can't, just if you were to tell somebody 15 years ago or 10 years ago, I can't even remember when Pitino got ousted from Louisville, but that in 2025, John Calipari and Rick Pitino are going to meet in March Madness, and John Calipari is going to be coaching the Arkansas Razorbacks and Pitino's coaching St. John's. It would be awesome. So I really hope they can beat Kansas round 1 and get that matchup. Some old foes at it again.
Not to mention that, hey, if you put that scenario in front of somebody 10 years ago and you just said, okay, now that this is happening, also guess the seeds. Most people would have said Arkansas is the 2, St. John's is the 10, right?
Yeah.
No, flip it. St. John's is the 2 and Arkansas is the 10. So I'm with you. I saw that too. There's so many great coaching matchups. There's so many great coaches in this tournament this year. I mean, even the first round game, right? You got Bill Self against John Calipari. Bill Self at Kansas, John Calipari now at Arkansas. So you just go up and down this bracket, and there are awesome games with awesome coaches or potentials, right, going into the later rounds. So that's gonna be a lot of fun to watch. I knew St. John's was good, and then I saw the bracket, and I was like, okay, St. John's is damn good. I didn't realize they were a 2 seed. They were that good, but hey, that's Rick Pitino, man. The guy can just coach. So in terms of Cinderellas, I think there are a couple that are outside the SEC that I can touch on, and then another one inside the SEC. But I touched on this one earlier. I really do think, and watch, they're going to lose in the first round and make me look like an idiot. But I think that UC San Diego, because of that 3-point shooting prowess that they have, they've got a real shot. They just, again, if you go look at their statistics, right, they try to play the Golden State Warriors game. They just heave up threes. So if they get hot, right, like they can beat just about anybody and could make a run. So I think UC San Diego, first round, they get Michigan. Potentially second round, they would get either Texas A&M or Yale. And then if Auburn takes care of business, then they would get Auburn in the Sweet 16. So just keep an eye on them. I think that could be a Cinderella team. Another one to keep an eye on, another 2 actually, now that I'm looking at the bracket to keep an eye on. One would be Liberty. They're a 12 seed. You got 5 seed Oregon. And then potentially in the second round, they could get either Akron or 4 seed Arizona. I don't know much about the Flames, but I'm just looking at that on that side of the bracket and thinking that looks like a potential, run for a team there. And then also VCU. VCU is an 11 seed. They get BYU as a 6 seed, and then they could get Wisconsin as a 3 or Montana as a 14 in round 2. Look, VCU just has the pedigree, right? And I know that I think I'm right about this. They got kind of hot at the end of the year and won their conference tournament. So, VCU's done it before. They have the pedigree. I know it's not Shaka Smart there anymore, but that's still a team that has the history, right? And you could just see them making another run. So VCU, and then finally, you mentioned my Arkansas Cinderella team as well, which is funny to say that Coach Cal could potentially be coaching a Cinderella. But Texas, played pretty well. They played their way into the tournament. They're in the play-in game. They probably needed one more, right, to solidify and get up to that 9-10 level. They needed to beat Tennessee in the SEC tournament. Weren't able to do it. However, they get 2 wins. They play their way into the tournament, and if they get, if they can, play as well as they have been playing, they gave Tennessee a run too. It's not like Tennessee throttled them. They played well enough to push Tennessee at least into the second half, late in the second half. So they've got to win the play-in game first, which I believe might be tonight. I think it's coming up here later tonight. But if Texas
Xavier tonight,
so if Texas can win the play-in game against Xavier, and who knows? Anything can happen, man. It's March Madness.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, they, similar to what I said about UNC, I don't think the Longhorns felt like they were a lock for the tournament at all, as evidenced by the fact that they're only in the play-in game. Personally, I would have said they should have been left out, but hey, that's a rival talking here. But no, in all seriousness, I mean, they have the SEC's leading scorer, Trey Johnson, 19.8 points a game. So the freshman is a beast, and if he's hot, then they're going to be really tough to beat. So I think that's a good call out. I was going to say I had a couple things I was looking up here. First of all, just to bring it back to Rick Pitino for a second, I don't know if you caught this quote. Another honorable mention for Muschamp Coach of the Week, but after St. John's won the Big East tournament this past weekend, in the post-game interview, the reporter asked Pitino if he had any plans to celebrate the win, and he said, "I'm going to drink an entire quart of Jameson." So Coach Pitino is, I think he's in his mid-70s at this point and just as spry as ever. So excited to have him back, honestly, in college football. One other anecdote, you mentioned a potential Cinderella in VCU, which I think is a good call out. I don't know if, a 6 seed is low enough to be called a Cinderella, but I would almost flip that and say that BYU could be. I don't know anything about them. I've just heard a lot of people say that they like them to be a Cinderella. And the one interesting tidbit but the one interesting tidbit I had on them is actually not related to their current basketball roster, but I'm not sure if you're aware, they have the number one recruit in the country in basketball for 2025 committed to BYU. Some guy named AJ Dibansta. He's out of Utah, so he's, from the state, but the Mormons are ponying up some NIL money, especially if you get the number one recruit in basketball. That's big money. So
you would say that. Does he have to go on a mission, or is he missioning after school?
I have no idea. I'm assuming after, or he may not even be part of LDS, the church. He might just be a paid mercenary
player.
Yeah, I don't know what the situation is with his religious leanings, but I thought that was interesting that BYU has the number one recruit committed to them.
Impressive.
One thing too I wanted to touch on is, we talked a little bit about earlier, like toughest roads. And I wanted to mention, I think Auburn has a really tough road. And that's partly why I didn't actually pick them to make it to the Final Four, because if you look at their potential second round game, right? So Creighton, great basketball program, lost in the Big East title to St. John's. So they're runner-up in the Big East. They're a 9 seed. And then Louisville, who, again, I'm not going to sit here and pretend like I watched a lot of basketball and understand why certain teams were seeded where, but Louisville is 27-7 overall and went 18-2 in the ACC, which I know the ACC was very much down. It's top heavy, right? Duke went 19-1, Clemson went 18-2, Louisville went 18-2, head and shoulders above the rest of the league. But I was surprised to see them, who have a very similar record to Clemson, all the way down on the 8 seed line. So I think either one of those teams is going to be a tough matchup in round 2. And then, as we mentioned, looking forward ahead, if Auburn wins that and gets to the Sweet 16, they could potentially be going up against Cinderella, 3-point bomber UC San Diego, or Texas A&M, who's already beat Auburn this year. So at the very least, it's going to be a tough matchup. They're not going to be intimidated or scared by a 1 seed. Or, if San Diego loses and Michigan, doesn't fall victim to an upset in round 1, and Michigan potentially gets by Yale or A&M, Michigan just won the Big Ten, and they're a 5 seed. So I just think Auburn's got a tough road. And then again, if you get through that, meet somebody in the Elite 8, like I had Michigan State getting that far. Izzo in March, that team is just gritty, going to grind it out. They're going to be tough. Ole Miss could be tough. Iowa State. So I just look at Auburn and I think they're going to be tested, as everyone will. But I really think they're going to be tested outside of the Alabama State game at every phase of these games. And so that's part of the reason I didn't have them making it all the way to the Final Four.
Yeah, same thing. I write the newsletter this morning. I was reading a little bit to get caught up and also to understand a little bit better, who had an easy-ish road, right? No road to the Final Four is easy, but who had the easier road versus who had the tougher road. And almost universally, Auburn was seen as having one of the tougher roads. Part of that was because I believe in that region, which is, what region are they? In the South. In the South region, they have 8 Ken Palm top 25 defenses in that region. So that's just, those defenses are stout. And, all it takes is one, if those teams advance, which there's 8 of them in that region, 8 out of 16, so odds are you're gonna catch probably 2 of them at least, and then probably you could catch 2 to 3 of them potentially. So that being said, all it takes is one to put the clamps on you before you even get to the Final Four. So it's a tough road for Auburn. I think Tennessee also. I think like you mentioned, like tough road for Tennessee as well. While I'm trying to remember who they said the easiest roads was. I think Florida had Florida got one of the easier roads potentially on their side of the bracket. So yeah, it was interesting to read some of those to hear what they had to say. But even just the eyeball test with Auburn and looking at that side of the bracket, like you said, like hey, Tom Izzo's there, A&M, which it just depends, 50-50. If you catch A&M on a good day, they can be very tough, which Auburn knows, right? Just 2 weeks ago, A&M was able to take down the number 1 team in the country when most folks were thinking that was after they'd lost 4 straight. Well, A&M, you caught A&M on a good night for the Aggies, and they were able to take you down. So, yeah, gonna be interesting to see if Auburn's able to make it out of there. And also, like we talked about this before the show, and not to be doom and gloom here, Auburn fans, that we're not saying you don't have a good team. You really do. You've got a great shot to get to the Final Four. But looking at history, right? Like Bruce Pearl he's always had really good teams, great teams. He just kind of falls short in a little way, like Rick Barnes does over at Tennessee, right? Rick Barnes has been around forever. Last time that guy went to the Final Four was in 2004, I think, or 2002 with TJ Ford at Texas. You remind me when I think you said Auburn went to the Final Four a couple of years ago with
2019.
2019, they went to a Final Four. So there's precedent there that he's done it at Auburn, but Bruce Pearl's been around for 17 years, right? I think 7 years at Tennessee, 18 years, actually, 11 years. This is his 11th year at Auburn. Only one Final Four show for it, no national titles. I know he's one of the great coaches in the sport. For whatever reason, he just seems to fall short. So that's kind of why I didn't have them in the Final Four.
Yeah, no, I think that's fair. Well, let's kick it to an ad break. So we are presented tonight by the Steer Agency. I'm going to ad-lib a little bit here. Basketball is all about strategy, just like winning in business. Whether you're dialing up the perfect play for March Madness or looking to dominate in public affairs, PR, or digital marketing, you need a team that delivers results. That's where the Steer Agency comes in. They craft winning strategies. They get you seen, heard, and ahead of the competition. Don't just play the game, control it. Visit thesteeragency.com today and take your brand to the next level. Make them the next Cinderella story. All right. Well, I think we pretty much talked all the basketball we can. We'll give you one last look at our Final Fours in case you want to, copy our work and lose whatever money you have dumped into your various bracket pools. But I've got Michigan State coming out of the South region. I have Duke coming out of the East region, Florida coming out of the West, and Tennessee coming out of the Midwest. And Bossman, you have Tennessee as well coming out of the Midwest, Florida as well coming out of the West. And then we differ here. You've got Alabama making it from the East and Iowa State from the South. Kudos to you for picking a 3 seed. Just kind of as we wrap up our basketball talk, I feel like I kind of do this every year, but this year in particular, I was just having a real hard time picking a ton of upsets. I really just looking through the bracket, I was like, man, it seems like a lot of these teams, that are at the top and like seated highly, just I have a hard time seeing them losing, which, famous last words for March Madness, right? I'm sure they're all going to get slaughtered out there. But anyway, that's, I've got two seeds and 2 1 seeds in my Final Four. So it's not like I'm really going out on a limb.
I will say I had, I said this at the outset of the show that I kind of realized that I couldn't pick an all SEC Final Four. Statistically, that's probably just not going to happen. And then I also started realizing too that like I only had 1 and 2 seeds. I was like, there's no way that's going to happen. Right. And even a 3 seed, I think may be too high. Like not every year, but nearly every year, right? Like 8 out of 10, 9 out of 10, you have like someone who's a 6 seed or higher, like a 6 to an 11 that makes the Final Four. And so, I thought, okay, best I could do is a 3 seed Iowa State. Because I had Michigan State coming out of the South at first. And then I thought about it more. I was like, no, I've seen Iowa State play this year a little bit. They're a pretty good team. So Iowa State it is.
Yep. Fair enough. I'll just give one shout out. If there's going to be a team, this would mean they would have to get through Florida. But I do think Maryland is good. They may be the higher-ish seed that could make a run.
Yes.
I think they're good, and I also just love the name the Crab Five. So if anybody's going to make a good deep run, we'll let the Terps, and we've got some family, grandpa and uncle that attended University of Maryland, so we'll give them some love. The Crab Five is a fantastic nickname, and we might be able to see a deep run from them. But again, Florida is so good, so I have a hard time seeing them beat Florida, but crazier things have happened, certainly. So I think that will do it for our basketball talk. We do have a Muschamp Coach of the Week this week, so I will kick it over to you to intro it, and then I'll cue up our clip here.
Certainly. So our last Muschamp Coach of the Week, we had, I believe it was Coach Cal was our Muschamp Coach of the Week. And, we didn't have a ton for basketball season, but he had a great little quote a couple weeks ago. You can go back and find that one on YouTube. But anyway, this week we had another great one that came out of the SEC tournament. Bruce Pearl gave us an awesome little clip here from when he was on set after an Auburn win during the tournament. So you can check it out now.
Key to our three-point line defense is I got bigs that can get out there and guard guards. I got bigs that can get out there and guard guards. And my guards are pussies. They're going to go down there and bang a little bit. That's good to go. He's in the locker room. He's in the locker room. He's comfortable. I love you. He's not writing my check right now.
So Coach Pearl there just got a little excited and forgot he was on live national TV and thought he was still in the huddle with all of his guys or in the locker room, right, in front of his coaches, trying to fire everybody up like, you guys aren't, pussies.
Yeah, I think YouTube is going to censor us for some of the language used there. But, Bruce really just letting it fly on live TV. You heard, I think that was Seth Greenberg. Once he realized what he just said, just starts howling with laughter. Jay Williams is kind of looking at him. Yeah, that even his Johnny Broom, his star player is kind of like, whoa.
Coach, do you know? Yeah, we're on live TV.
Yeah,
he took a little note out of Coach Saban's book because I know also Coach Saban has been on the hot seat with the FCC recently for his cussing on College Game Day this year. So yeah, I think Coach Saban and Bruce Pearl have been hanging out a little bit too much lately.
I can see that. And one thing I'll say about Bruce Pearl, not only is he a phenomenal basketball coach, but he does not hold anything back. He will tell you exactly what he is thinking at all times. So I'm not surprised at all that he, had a bit of a slip there on live TV because, he's kind of he's the type of guy. I mean, there's of course the famous clips of him shirtless at all these different Auburn sporting events. I mean, he goes 100 miles an hour all the time. I don't think he has much of a filter. So frankly, ESPN is probably lucky that's the only thing that he let slip in that interview because I'm sure his team meetings and huddles are extremely colorful.
I will say this too. ESPN they have to pay fines and stuff for this every once in a while from the FCC. However, at the same time, they get so much free advertising out of the clips that go viral like this that they may be, willing to just let it slide because, at the end of the day, it might make them their money back anyway.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think that will do it. We're going to cut it a little short tonight. We still went 50 minutes on March Madness. So my advice to you guys, this weekend is fake sick tomorrow and Friday. Cancel all your weekend plans and just soak in what is one of the most fun weekends of the sports calendar, with the 4 days opening weekend of March Madness is just nonstop, wall-to-wall fun. So I can't wait to flip it on tomorrow. Thankfully, I'm blessed enough to still work from home, so don't tell my boss, but I'll have games on all day in the background. And I can't wait, and I can't wait to see how the SEC does. With 14 teams, it's going to be everybody outside of LSU and South Carolina, but everybody's got a game this weekend to be excited about, which is a great thing.
And I'll tell you, we're already hearing this from our friends who are in other conferences, right? Whether it's the ACC or the Big Ten or what have you. The SEC never performs when it comes to the postseason. We win national championships. They always like to forget that convenient fact. But when it comes to bowl games or the tournament or whatever, yeah, the SEC has had some struggles. So we've got 14 teams in. We got to have a good showing this year to show that, hey, that conference actually was as deep as the committee said. Because you're even seeing it on Twitter, like, oh, there's a bunch of collusion going on because ESPN's the partner of the SEC and all that, right? So, the SEC's got to show up and show out. And I'm with you. I'm so excited for these games. College football is my first love, but you got to love college basketball, and especially this year when it was so much fun to flip on the TV. And any given Saturday, you could see a ranked on ranked matchup within the SEC, which you just didn't see that often in prior years. And the coaching matchups we've got, it's going to be a lot of fun. And this is why the man cave was invented, was for March Madness. You can 4 TVs up there, right? You got different games. You got a game on True TV, a game on TBS and all that. So it was invented for days like tomorrow and days like Friday, and for the entire SEC football season, as we all know. So enjoy it while we can, and we can talk a lot more about who's going to be making the Sweet 16 next week.
Absolutely. Well, thanks again for tuning in, y'all. We'll be back next week, same time, 7 p.m. Eastern. Everybody have a great weekend. Appreciate y'all.